Welcome to UGC Pathshala, Paper 11, Japanese History and Society. I am Shamshad Khan, visiting faculty, Delhi University. In this module, we will discuss Taiho Code sewing system and Japanese feudalism. The main objective of this module is to familiarize you with the Taiho Code, the sewing system, and the rise and fall of feudalism in Japan. As you are aware, Japan had undergone through various phases of tribal rule, civil monarchy, warrior rule, and feudal monarchy. The Japanese authorities, however, wanted to establish a centralized rule to overcome the situation of anarchy. To achieve this objective, Japan emulated Chinese-style institutions. Before proceeding further, let me give you brief background. 6th century Japan was characterized by the rule of tribal warrior aristocracy. During that time, the Japanese society was simply organized with the patriarchal clans as the key social unit. The head of the clan quite adequately fulfilling the role of patriarch, priest and ruler. Japan's hilly topography that made transportation difficult enhanced the need for self-sufficiency. The practice of irrigated agriculture further heightened the interdependency of the community as they cooperated in maintaining the infrastructure and managing the labor-intensive nature of work. Blood ties within the clan, hereditary ties that bound the serfs and their masters, and communal ties were soon transcended by the emergence of a stronghold in the Yamato basin. The Yamato clan's hegemony was recognized by the defeated chieftains. However, the Yamato ruler was not an absolute monarch. The concept of sovereign state ruled by a strong central authority who commanded the respect and loyalty of all the subjects was still not part of the Japanese purview. The Japanese government around 645 AD centralized its power. It established a new bureaucracy, legal system, and started effective tax management through a registry system. Buddhist philosophy and religion power was used to stabilize the country. The concept of ruler, written laws, system of land distribution, and taxation and military organization, all of these indicate a new way of life based on an orderly and harmonious society that aimed for the common good for all. 7th century may be looked upon as a time of transition when the former elite converted themselves into a civil nobility, divulging themselves of their former warlike and localized qualities. They gained new prestige and security through their association with the new central government and access to highly sophisticated lifestyle. Now let us turn our focus towards Taiho Code. The Taiho Code, a codification of legal and administrative changes since 646, was formally issued in 701 AD by Emperor Monmu at Fujiwara. It marked the zenith of Japanese efforts to emulate the Chinese model to their country while being equally careful to protect the inner recesses of their political and social traditions. It was the first legal code in Japan containing both penal, that is Ritsu, and administrative, that is Ryo law, and amendments to the same. The code provided the final component of the Ritsu-Ryo style government that sought to cultivate popular morality and enabled the citizen to become ideal Confucian citizen. The officials were tasked with edifying the populace while themselves being guided by the emperor. The Chinese-inspired style of bureaucratic governance was accompanied by its model of imperial conduct. The Chinese word of emperor, kotei, was borrowed to refer to the Japanese sovereign, that is Tenno, suggesting how it had conceptually evolved to denote a Chinese style despotic sovereign who personally looked after the state affairs. The hereditary inviolability of imperial house was preserved by tracing the source of the heavenly mandate bestowed upon them to the sun goddesses Amaterasu. This code remained in force till 757 AD, till the Euro Code came to replace it. The Euro Code, compiled as early as 718 AD, is considered the oldest extant legal code, as the Taiho Code was unable to survive the ravages of time and history. These codes laid out the framework for political, social, and economic institutions and served as the continuing basis of administrative practice throughout the subsequent feudal era, though they fell into disuse in time. However, they laid the base for Japan's legal institutions until the 15th century and for Japanese conception of authority, administrative organization, taxation, and judicial process. The concept that governed the people's relationship to source of wealth and power changed as practice of localized independency gave way to a system where subjects were classified on the basis of their differing relationship to the sovereign. Now let us focus on administrative part of Taiho Code. Most officers created by Emperor Temmu were included in the polity authorized by these codes, with change in jurisdiction and status as required. The imperial house and the officials who served it formed the aristocracy. The central government was divided into two major divisions: the Office of Deities to look after Shinto rituals, and the Grand Council of State, which encompassed the civil administration. The civil bureaucracy was headed by three ministers who worked through executive officers to superintendent 8 ministers. The subordination of the imperial household to the Council of State was the most important adjustment. These codes also revised the system of official ranking and systemized the selection and promotion procedure of bureaucrats. The central government was mainly staffed by court aristocracy. Thus, the polity system was not completely hereditary in nature, as many candidates were available for any given post, but the possibility of individual mobility within the official hierarchy was slim. Perquisites of power and seminal salary payments on the basis of rank and officers were also specified. The hierarchical nature of regional administration had the court aristocrat at the top. They served as provincial governors and regained broad powers they had been deprived of. Their duties included tax collection, storage and shipment, adjustment of land holdings, regular census taking, and direction of provincial militia. Around 600 people, mostly of local origin, formed the provincial administration. The second level comprised of district magistrates chosen from the families of local notables. Though they were to give obeisance to provincial governors, they enjoyed certain privileges unavailable to others. They held their post for life and could transfer the land and military powers they received to their offsprings. The administrative village, composed of 50 households each and monitored by a headman, was the lowest level of regional authority. Within this, units of 5 households policed crimes. The household was an administrative device organized to facilitate troops conscription and tax collection. Now let us discuss land distribution and taxation under the Taiho Code. The main objective of these codes were to control the peasantry that comprised over 99% of the population. Annual taxes included local and national labor services, a product tax and military duty. The 3% grain tax owed by the landholders was stored in neighborhood warehouses and used to finance the provincial government. To ensure that each taxpayer could bear their share of burden, every person aged 6 and older was granted a parcel of land for a lifetime. Maintenance of the fiscal and military well-being of the court also required regular census and detailed compilation of tax documents. Migration was also strongly prohibited in these courts. However, overpopulation was the only legal grounds for people who wanted to migrate. The experiment with a conscript army was the least successful of aspect of the Taika reform. They were required to bring their own equipment and provisions. Lacking discipline and fighting spirit, they degenerated into little more than labor gangs. Now let us discuss the judicial system and penal law under the Taiho Code. Judicial proceedings were divided under the Ritsuryo system into civil litigation and criminal suits. Trials as well as complaints of the farmer were held and filed during the months between harvest and planting, that is from October to February. For criminal suits to be instituted, indictments from Danjodai, complaints from injured parties, and the general public were required. The accused were often tortured to elicit confession when they refused to acknowledge their crime despite a strong presumption of guilt. Recitation of passage of Ritsuryo Kyakushiki formed the basis of the judgment. Such practices were meant to demonstrate the need for a strict adherence to the law in matters like punishment of criminals. They were not adopted to protect the criminal's right. The Ritsu enumerated the penalties and punishments. It sought to chastise and rehabilitate criminals to prevent repeat of such crimes. It was a deterrence policy to rid the general populace of misbehavior, that is, conduct that was not conform of Confucian standard. 5 kinds of punishment were provided for flogging, beating, forced labor, exile, and death. However, punishment was remitted if the transgressor surrendered prior to the discovery of the crime. This was due to the understanding that being impertinent was as bad as committing a crime. But within a century, the drive of the reforms had died down. The modification undertaken by the Japanese played a crucial role in the revival of older habits that hindered the consolidation and functioning of a strong central core. The aristocracy, being bereft of the merit criterion, enabled it to take a hereditary form before the benefit of a regulated bureaucracy could be realized. A general drift towards decentralization and patrimonialism in government affairs became apparent, and the Taiho system of land control was abandoned in favor of Shoen, a form of private proprietorship. The Taiho concept of a strong emperor ruling through his personal bureaucracy was abandoned, and realignment of power saw the rise of great court families and Buddhist monasteries. The legal powers of the emperor were gradually being exercised by advisors such as the Fujiwara from the mid-9th century. Both central and provincial governments underwent decay as neglect, corruption, and exploitation spread through the ranks of the aristocracy, with local bands performing the duties of the state. This combination of erosion and shift of power reflected the society's response to the needs to maintain local order and security. The emergence of feudal style of government thus could be seen as the institutive solution to the chaotic facade of central authority that existed during those times. Unlike Western Europe, where the military threat from the barbarian plunged into feudalism, Japan's disorder was primarily internally caused, making the transition less abrupt. Integrated into the administrative structure and the aristocratic system of land tenure by the late Heian period, the warrior families, who were the creators of feudal institutions and practices, were the most obvious similarity between medieval Europe and pre-modern Japan. Accompanied by the decline in the Ritsu-Ryo system, the persistence of Shoen and Shiki allowed for greater local influence on their parts as they executed their duties for the imperial court and used it to expand and consolidate their own landed interest. The new system differed basically in how various tax immunities were secured in addition to private tenure. Vital elements of independent estate authority over land dissipated as tax exemption and immunities from civil or criminal jurisdiction was granted. Such proprietorship appeared sporadically in the 8th century but steadily grew thereafter. When it had run its full course, sometimes a state that approximately 5,000 separate Shoen jurisdictions were present in 13th century Japan. The proprietors assumed most of the duties of governance and fiscal rights which had once belonged to the central government. The Shoen system became a structure of government in itself as it incorporated many procedures of the imperial system of local government in its internal organization. There was also a gradual but quantitatively significant flow of the elements of higher civilization to the provinces. It gave rise to a system of land law and local administration quite alien to the spirit of Taiho's institutions. It lay at the bottom of a wide-scale return to patrimonialism in government and social relationships. Road and waterways were improved to facilitate transport of the produce of distant Shoen. Shoen were encouraged to become center of craft, production and commercial activities. The Shoen performed a transitional economic function. Granting of Shiki rights as part of the fabric of military allegiances eventually became the basis for the appearance of the true landed fief. The abandonment of conscripted armies resulted in the role of these local warriors in maintaining public peace in the provinces, being the only group capable of suppressing local rebellion or dealing with local brigandage. They were also employed as personal bodyguards for leading aristocratic families and even temples. By 12th century, as aristocratic control over local affairs fell and local disorder spread, warrior family alliances emerged who used their connections to weld together semi-stable associations of warrior bands and eventually became involved in court politics. They thus paved the way for feudal forms of rule, the first attempt being the establishment of Kamakura shogunate in 1192. Minamoto no Yoritomo made the warrior alliance to the core of a government by vassalage. Rather than abolishing the Shoen, he built a feudal system on them. The personal vassals of Yoritomo, that was known as Gokenin, received grants of land rights, and the vassalage served as a basis for the new set of institutions such as the Jito, that is land stewards, and Shugo, that is provincial governors. Over time, these took on a hereditary and therefore less personal form. The early Muromachi period saw the rise of Gokenin system such that despite attempts to keep them in check, the Jito and Shugo continued to represent a threat to the shogunate and the local imperial authority. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the civil struggles saw the emergence of kokujin. They were protective of their land rights and extended their local rights and organized ikki, which is known as local leagues, to resist the intrusion of outsider and rebel against the shogunate. As the effective power passed to the shogo, with their power to protect or redistribute land rights being of primary importance, they attempted to make vassals out of the kokujin, but they were largely unsuccessful. The abandonment of the practice of equal inheritance by the 14th century meant that while wealth and power of the family could be transmitted without domination, there was frequent outbreak of disputes within families. These succession disputes had reverberation, pulling in the local warriors as support for the competing sides. Amid these chaos, the feudal system started disintegrating. Since no principle of authority except military strength was generally accepted, feudalism was inherently unstable, perpetually thrown out of the equilibrium by local warfare. Finally, the commercialization in the Middle and Late Edo period led to the decline of the dominant social position of the daimyo and the warrior class, as they were constantly plagued by indebtedness and the need to find non-official by employment. The beneficiaries of the commercial economy were the large merchants, rich and middle peasants, and provincial traders and merchants. The freezing of society that began before 1600 and was accelerated by the onset of peace and declining opportunities for mobility resulted in the maintenance of social stability in the face of commercial developments as most men accepted their station in life. The final collapse of the peculiar post-feudal settlement came with the intrusion of the West and was marked by the restoration of the governing power to the emperor. This phenomena took place in 1868 and is known as Meiji Restoration. Since there were still some ex-daimyo who refused to obey the imperial court, in 1871 the domains were abolished and prefectures were established, making the end of the political feudal system in Japan. With this, we come to an end of this module. Thank you.